Very happy to be here. My name's Michael Marchand. I'm with the Colville Tribe. Who knows where Omak, Washington is? There's less than know where Guatemala. Right. But if you want to find it, just go over these big mountains straight east, and you'll run right into it. It's in the Okanagan River Valley, which goes to the Columbia River. I'll just spend a little bit about who we are. The present-day Colville Confederated Tribe is actually 12 tribes, and at one time in history, they're very nomadic people. There's all kinds of different tribes. Some are urban, some are agricultural, some are kind of mixes. Over here, we have lots of fishing tribes and live off the ocean and rivers or whatever. But my people were very nomadic. They were like a definition of nomadic, probably, and they lived in a vast, sprawling area from the tops of the Cascades to Dakota, basically. And on the river systems, half our people would stay on the Okanagan River and Columbia River, and they'd fish for salmon, back when there was salmon. The other half of the tribe would jump on their horses, head to the Great Plains, and basically hunt buffalo, but they were basically hunters, fishermen, also traders. There were so many salmon that came up Columbia River, literally tons and tons and tons of salmon. They'd dry it, put it in bales. Then they were businessmen. They'd trade that as a commodity up and down the West Coast, haul it to the Great Plains. We also had other things we bought and sold. And so they were basically kind of businessmen, kind of nomadic people, and they never stayed in one spot too long, most of our people. All that came to a big change. And then as the West got settled, entered into the reservation period, they removed all the Indians right from east of the Mississippi to Oklahoma, basically. And that continued rolling on out west, discovered gold and so forth. Things changed. And so I seen a note from General Sherman. He came into the Northwest before the Civil War. I seen a handwritten note. He said he was riding his horse through Colville country, what later became Colville country. He said, "This is the most rugged and impassable land he's ever been in his life. This would be a good place to put the Indians," he said. We were already there. And we knew how to get over these mountains, so it's no big deal to us. But that was his opinion. And so as the West got settled, the Northwest territories were kind of a gray area as far as land title. And United States asserted it, owned it. They had Lewis and Clark, right? They had a fort at Astoria or wherever. And David Thompson come down the Columbia River from Canada, and there was a dispute over who owned it. My tribe is called the Colville Tribe. It's definitely not a native name. There were two forts built at what's now the Colville Reservation. There was a Fort Okanagan, a Fort Colville. Did you notice there was like forts all over the United States? Fort Town this, Fort that, in Canada also. And whenever I see the word fort, I always think there's a backstory here. Why did someone feel a need to build a fort, right? So there was conflict, there was wars, there were people killing each other. You end up with a fort eventually. And you see that all over North America, probably the world, I don't know. But we had two forts, Fort Okanagan, Fort Colville. Interesting to me, I didn't even know this for most of my life, they were Hudson Bay Forts. Hudson Bay had claim to what is now the Colville Reservation. Because, well, for one thing, Kettle Falls, which is where Fort Colville was probably one of the best salmon fisheries in the world, anywhere in the world. Not that there weren't salmon other places, but just the configuration of the falls, it was a perfectly easy place to catch salmon. They put big, like this hat you just gave away. We had basket traps. They were like upside down hats, about as big as this stage. We'd put them under the falls, sit back and watch salmon jump into these traps. Every day we'd have to pull out 2,000 salmon every day out of each trap. And that's how we lived for 10,000 years at least. And that's how hard we worked as Colvilles. They'd say, "Oh, the traps are filling up. It's time to go get our fish." And they don't go. And so it was a trade center, and so a spot like that's popular. People all over the continent need food, right? And so it became a trade center, and now they're finding out there's maybe maybe a dozen, maybe more than a dozen major trade centers in North America for different reasons in different parts of the country. But Kettle Falls was a major trade center. Every summer, thousands of people would gather there. Some were fishermen, some were businessmen, some were just traders. And so they find artifacts at Kettle Falls from the Atlantic Ocean, from the Gulf of Mexico, from Alaska. People traveled in North America. You know, people look at maps now and they'll say there's reservation here, reservation there, and they think that's kind of how things were. Not true. Now, maybe that's true now, but for thousands of years, our people traveled, they traded anywhere a horse could go or a canoe could go or where you could walk. There were Indians there traveling. They're traversing back and forth across country trading. They were businessmen. And so anyway, Hudson Bay gets out to the west. Hudson Bay, biggest company in the world, like Microsoft. So they had Hudson Bay Company, and what was the other one was East Indies Company, both British companies. They kind of basically owned the world. They built these forts. They bumped us off, plugged right into this trade center that's been there for 10,000 years. It became a Hudson Bay Trade Center. Hudson Bay made a lot of money in furs. In today's dollars, it's $1 billion business. They're taking furs from Northwest, selling them to the Chinese, Europe, wherever. But a boatload of furs is worth more than a boatload of gold in those days. And so they'd send out 20 ships. If 19 of them sank, one maybe paid for the 19 that sank. It was that kind of money. They were making money. So anyway, Hudson Bay also controlled everything. They controlled the armies. I asked my grandma, when was our first contact with white people? And she said, well, it was your grandmas. They were getting chased through the woods. There were soldiers on horseback trying to cut their heads off. And you're lucky your grandmas could run really fast. And but these are the precursors that built the forts, the Hudson Bay people. And people think of Hudson Bay now, it's like, right, it's at the mall. They got kind of nice stuff at the mall. And they've always been like that. But if you didn't trade with Hudson Bay in the 1800s, you died, you know, you were going to get killed. And that's just the way the world was. You know, it was a rough world. And us tribes, we weren't that gentle sometimes either. So, you know, that's just the way things were. But anyway, I want to get to the point of eventually these lines get drawn. The United States in 1846, I think they drew a line across North America. North that line, you're Canadian. South that line, you're American. And you got two different countries. But before 1846, we had two Colville Forts, or Okanagan, Colville, and we actually burned down one of the forts. We burned down Fort Okanagan, yay. But the bad part about that is they left the Fort Colville, and that became our name. So that's where our name came from, Fort Colville. So we should have burned down Fort Colville, and then we'd be named Okanagan, which is the Indian word, you know. That's history, though. Anyway, and there's a lot more history, but basically, like a lot of tribes, they stuck a gun to our head and marched us to the reservations. This is your new home, you know, and that's a real common story in the United States, probably Canada too. And so all across from East Coast to West Coast, there were tribes bisected by that border. And like in my tribe, we have Okanagans. Okanagans on the American side, Okanagans on the Canadian side. We had another tribe called Arrow Lakes in English. And our language is roughly Sinixt, and I don't even say it right. But and that's a little different story. The Sinixt land was beautiful big lakes, beautiful big mountains, minerals. It was a little bit too good. The Canada confiscated all that land, declared the Sinixt people extinct, literally. And so all of my life, my dad's people were the Sinixt. They were extinct. I don't know of any other Canadian tribe with that status. There were a lot of American tribes terminated in the 50s and 60s. Canada, I know we were declared extinct. I'm not sure about other tribes. I think we may be the only one like that, but they were just declared extinct, got no compensation, nothing. You're just extinct. And so, so we've been kind of watching Canada all along, and we've watched these cases he talked about, like Delgamutte case and Chilcotin case. And we wonder, will that apply to my people or not? Seems like it might. And so we kind of keep an eye on that. Plus, we have 99 lawsuits going on in the United States all the time, too. But That kind of sets the stage. I just want to go back the clock up to just my life anyway. I was raised on a reservation. We have a big sprawling reservation, lots of land, and my family were leaders. Although when I was a small child, I didn't know they were leaders. I just thought, your family, right? And so both my grandparents had big ranches and big extended families. We all worked ranch, and we just kind of, and then I think they kind of selected me, and they kind of gave me special treatment. I'm not sure why, but I was kind of kept from non-Indians for the first 5 years of my life, and I thought the whole world was my relatives or friends of my relatives, and that's just the way I was raised. And my grandparents would take me around, travel. They're always traveling around, hunting, fishing, or visiting people, and they'd tell me stories. And they were teaching you, but I didn't realize they were teaching me. I just thought they're stories, And so turns out later on, I find out my grandpa is chairman of the tribe. He's kind of like this guy over here, but he's in charge of the government. He talks to presidents, talks to congressmen. He's that kind of guy. But at home, we're just sitting on our horses rearing up cows. He's just my grandpa at home. That's how I knew him. But he would take me around what was our traditional land, and he happened to be an Entiat Indian, and his family was Entiats. And Entiat is located, go to Wenatchee, Washington, about 10 miles north. There's a little river called Entiat River, and there used to be a village there. It never was a big place, and there was an Entiat chief named Chief Silkasasket. That means standing cloud. He lived a long life, had 3 wives, I don't think at the same time, but he had lots of kids. Although that was allowable, and so like half the Colville Tribe derives from this Chief Silkasasket now, and he was just a very respected chief. He was a warrior and considered very wise. When different tribes would get in disputes, he'd come and talk to Chief Silkasasket because people believed in him. He was an honest, respected guy. Anyway, in the 1960s, they started damming up the Columbia River. Now it's one dam after another, right? But my grandpa used to drive around, and he'd say, our tribe used to camp right here. And so like every 15, 20 miles, there'd be a camp, because they were like horse people usually. And he'd say, they camped here, they camped there, and the original village was here, but it's dammed up now. There's the water over it. So we'd stop at Entiat. Today it's just a teeny tiny town, maybe a few hundred people, but he'd stop by the bridge and say, right there, that's where the chief used to live. And I'd be looking at the water, I was like a toddler probably, and then you'd say, that was your great-great-grandpa, the chief. And then you'd say, you lived right there, and the village was right here. It's all underwater now. Then you'd say, what do you think the chief's teepee looked like? He's always asking me questions. And I said, well, he's a chief. He must have had like the mansion of teepees, right? So, like that. They didn't have Rolls Royces or nothing, but then he'd just kind of smile, and he'd say, no, it wasn't like that. He actually had the poorest teepee in the whole village, I was kind of shocked, and he said, because he gave everything he had away. He gave it to, I get teary-eyed now, but then I wasn't, but he gave everything to the widows, to the elders, orphans. He had nothing. So I'm chairman now. I'm like this guy was, but he's recovering. I'm watching him real close now. But it's just a simple little story. It took my grandpa probably less than 5 minutes to tell it to me. I think about that every day. So anyway, raised like that. I was raised with this Indian people, and they're all telling me stories, right? And it all, maybe some of it sunk in my head, some of it probably didn't, but some of it did. And they spent a lot of time teaching you kind of like about the ethics, kind of about values, what's important. Is money important? Is having a big teepee important? None of those things are that important. What's important is like what you said, your family's important, your tribe's important. Keeping the world clean enough to live in, that's important. But there's things important, things not so important. They're nice, I got a Harley motorcycle. I'd like to get a new Indian one. That costs money, I'm not opposed to money, but it's not the most important thing to me, And so I was raised like that. And then I remember the first white guy I noticed. I'm sure I'd probably seen others before that, but one of my younger aunts married a white guy, and he walks in the house. I'm looking at this guy. This guy's like so white, he's shiny. And I listened to him talk, and he's a funny guy. He's a really funny guy. That's why she liked him. We all liked him, but I was thinking, like, this guy, he might be extraterrestrial, I think. Because he didn't know how to do anything. You know, he didn't know how to hunt. He didn't know how to fish. He didn't know how to do anything. I'm still convinced of that, but my aunt liked him. He seemed okay. We all got along okay. But that's kind of like how I remember meeting white people. And so I had a nice childhood. You know, I was all insulated from the world's problems, and I had a functional family, cousins, and so I had like ideal childhood. But that all changed pretty fast. My parents moved to the town of Omak, which is like 10,000 people. It hasn't changed in my lifetime, but it's a border town, a big reservation, a border town. And then I was born in 1953, so I start remembering things probably around 1960. I was in the first grade. It was a hot summer day. I was watching these kids cross the bridge. There's a Okanagan River on one side's off reservation, other side's reservation. And so they called the reservation side East Omak. That's kind of a special name, I guess. We thought it was cool. The white people thought that's like no man's land, you know. and I was watching this 4 kids on a bicycle pedaling from town, which is off reservation. It just looks just the same today. But they got halfway across the bridge, and I was sitting there with my cousin, and we're watching them. It's like 190 degrees in Omak. It's a hot day, you know. And they all stopped, and those kids were talking to each other. They were just like grade school kids. And then they turned around, and they went back to cross the river. And I'm sitting there with my big cousins. I'm probably 6, my cousin's probably 10. And I says, well, how come those guys got halfway across the bridge and stopped? And then they turned around, and he said, because if they crossed that bridge, we'd beat the hell out of them, he said. And that's just the way it was. There was race riots, there was fights, there might have been murders. People didn't get along in 1960 in Omak, Washington. There was a lot of racism. I got older, I was about 18, maybe 17 or something like that, and we were young teenagers. Cars were the big thing. It's like American Graffiti town, you know. But some of the girls from the res went over to town, and they said these white people ganged up on them, were treating them real bad, and shoving them around or whatever. And I don't know, that's what they said. Maybe they might have instigated it all, I don't know. But they came back, and we were mad. On the reservation side, there was a big drive-in theater. Back in those days, they had big drive-in theaters. Everyone would go there and park and watch the movie. And when the movie was done, they'd all leave, and the big stream of cars, they had to cross through East Omak. There was a little church, a tavern there, and a stop sign. And it's like a little town. We know who everyone is. We know who is picking on our girls. So that car, there's like a couple hundred cars coming through East Omak, all one after another. We seen that car with the instigators starting to fight. They got the stop sign, about 5 or 6 of my buddies. Of course, I was just observing all this. But they stopped that car, opened the doors up, yanked those guys out of the car, started beating them up. And so then there's like 50 cars behind them watching this go on. Well, they're all terrorized. These Indians are starting to kill everybody. And they thought, they didn't know, what was going on. So anyway, all these other cars behind there are stalled because they can't get by because there's a riot going on. And so they all start jumping out of their cars, fleeing for their lives, heading back to town. And so there's like 50 cars strewn all over East Omak, abandoned. Poor white people are just terrified for their lives. And then these guys in the car were getting beat up. They probably were in danger of losing their life. And there was a little cafe there, and me and my partner were sitting there rolling around. We thought that was the funniest thing we ever saw, and we're just, it was stupid, but that's how things were. And so I don't know if I've always tried to get into trouble, but it seems like it always follows me around, And so later on, I went to prep school. I ended up in a protest with what later became AIM. We took over the Mayflower and did stuff like that. And I heard of young Russell Means and Dennis Banks, and kind of a Vine Deloria disciple. I started reading his books, and I started thinking about stuff, and it seems like that just has never stopped in my life. And then one of my aunts, when I was young, she named me after a Wolverine, and then in our language it's Qualthamine. And Wolverines are not especially the wisest animal, but they really like to fight. You know? And they don't know how to back up. They don't know how to. They're not really negotiators. They just take what they want. They don't. They don't care if it's a grizzly bear or a wolf or what. Wolverine's going to win every time. And every tribe kind of has a different version of what they think a Wolverine is. But at first I thought that's kind of an odd name. But as I get older, I was thinking, I don't know how my aunt figured out I was a Wolverine. But all my life I've been in litigation, court battles all my life. When I got older, I went to college, I got a PhD, I got all that stuff. And so we've been in court for water rights, land rights, jurisdictional rights, you name it. We were in court for it. But all my life I was raised around my ancestors who had come from Arrow Lakes country, and they felt really sad. They'd get tears in their eyes. So we're Arrow Lakes people. We were the greatest fishermen. Kettle Falls underwater, it was wiped out by Grand Coulee Dam. And then our lands were confiscated, and it's really weird to be extinct, legally extinct. And so Canada's been going through all these processes over the years. I'm by no means an expert in Canada policy, but they opened up a treaty process about, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago one time. We went to Vancouver, and we said, well, we think we've been wrong. We tell them our story, and they says, yeah, that's a good story. We think you were wrong, and you probably should be in this treaty process. However, you guys are extinct, so too bad. And how do we get our foot in the door if we're extinct? You know, and they got all these laws which apply to First Nations. We're like in the same boat. Same stuff happened to us, but we're extinct. And so anyway, that's the way it was for since I think 1956 till today. We've been extinct. And then so about 10 years ago, we started thinking about, well, how do we get into court? we thought of starting up a test case, and we sent one of our tribal members up to shoot something. He shot an elk, got himself arrested in 2010. His name is Ricky Dizitel. He's a friend of mine. But and so we got our foot in the door. We got into court. That's what we wanted. They didn't even want to arrest him. He kind of had to twist your arm to get arrested. And, they're trying to they're trying to look the other way. So we don't really want to go to court. So he'd call him up and say, "Here I am." You know? I don't even know how he got his gun up there. I tried to go up there with my gun. They wouldn't let me cross the border. I'll back up and tell one more story from my youth. But he told me the teepee story, which is just like a little tiny story. But every morning I wake up, I think about it, you know, and I think like, am I still on track, or am I becoming like a typical tribal chairman? Whatever that is, you know. Yeah. But he told another story. There's a coyote story. Coyotes are a big thing in eastern Washington. I don't know if they are on this side or not, but coyote starts at the mouth of the Columbia River, and he goes up the river, kind of like in the creation days, kind of, and like every spot in the river, every village, almost every spot, there's a coyote story along the Columbia River. So I don't know, I don't think I've heard the whole story. It'd probably take months to tell the whole story. And each story can be really long, depending on how good a storyteller they are. And, you know, it's a whole different thing. But for the Entiat people, this is a really short, abbreviated version of it. But coyote he got up the Columbia River, he got up to where the Entiat people are, and he was looking for a wife. And the story is, Entiat people had the most beautiful women anywhere, and he really wanted an Entiat wife. And the Entiats are pretty stingy about their women. And then the coyote got there, they didn't really like the coyote anyway. And he said he wanted a wife, he wanted this and that, and the Entiat people said, no, we don't think so, go somewhere else. So he was mad, And he says, you guys, you darn Inuit people are so stingy. You got everything, and you got a pretty little place here, beautiful women here. I still like beautiful women, but anyway, he said, just for that, I'm going to give you guys the world's shortest river, and you're not going to have a good fishery. So, go to India today, what do you see? Shortest river anywhere. True story. And I mean, this river is like 5 miles long. But that's what we got on that's my mother's side of the family, Inuit people. But he kept going up the river, and there's more stories, and he finally got up to where the Kettle Falls area is, and is now, and they treated him really good, and they had big feasts for him, gave him food, they gave him everything he wanted. They gave him his pick for a wife, and he just loved the Arrow Lakes people. He liked the Sinixt people. We treated him like a king. This is my dad's side of the family. And he says, you guys are pretty cool, you Arrow Lakes people. You guys treated me right. And he said, therefore, I'm going to give you guys the best fishery on planet Earth. You get the best land on planet Earth. And so you can have all the land from Kettle Falls to the headwaters of the Columbia, basically, which is a huge territory. It's like 200 miles at least north-south, you know, and there's other tribes along the way too. I leave out a lot of details, and so that's how it came to be. And so anyway, you move the clock up from, I heard that story when I was a child. Ricky Distel shot the elk in 2010. We finally got to court 2017 in, what the heck town were we in? Nelson, BC, provincial court. We were in court, we was in court for 3 months, and then that's called testify. And we had, basically in Delgamook case, but you have to prove his history. Did you own the land before? And you have to have what was history prove and so forth. And so we kind of followed the same model. We had to present a lot of technical history and expertise and stuff. And we did that to show this was where we hunted, this was where we lived. But the other thing about Delgamook is that it allows for traditional information to get into the courts, which is kind of different than most places. And so oral histories can get into court as evidence. Your traditionals from your tribe can get into court as evidence. And so those become very important, and especially in Canada, I think it's probably spread from Canada now. And so anyway, so like Ricky Distel, they asked some questions like, why do you hunt? He was going through all the customs of hunting. Different tribes have different hunting customs. Like in my tribe, a boy shoots his first deer. There's ceremonies involved and prayers. Basically, they'll take the deer heart out and they'll hang it and dry it. And it's that kind of thing. There's lots of details to it. And so Ricky would go through all that. And then we're kind of Vision Quest tribe. They'll send kids out for Vision Quest. But there's different ways to do it. And so they asked Ricky if he did all this. He said, yeah, we still do all that. That's our people. He's doing all this in court. And then the judge is a lady, and she says, if you don't mind, would you sing your song? And so Ricky said, yeah, sure, I don't mind. So he sang a song. This is all in court. This stuff is all in court, and it's pretty dramatic. And so all of our people were there in the peanut gallery watching the court too every day. Anyway, I finally got to my time on the stand, and they asked me like, okay, Mr. Marchand, actually they called me Dr. Marchand. He says, why do your people even want this land? And so I jumped in that story I just told you about Cody. And it was making the federal prosecutor or whatever he is really nervous. He's getting all fidgety like a jack-in-the-box. And I was thinking like, I gotta speed this story up and get done because he looked like he's gonna jump up and do something. So I just put a dot in that story and finish it, and that's why we're here, because Cody gave us this land, you know. The prosecutor jumps up right on cue, says, I object. So Cody needs a lawyer now. I just thought that was so funny. Coyote got objected to in the Queen's Court. So that took like 3 months and probably took 20 years of research and planning and scheming before we got to court. And we won almost every count in trial court. And the judge said, point number one, we agree this was Sinixt territory. Next point, we agree the Sinixt people moved to the Colville Reservation, or most of them did. We agree that the Sinixt leadership, the chiefs, moved to the Colville Reservation. Another point, we think you guys still exist. That was a good one. And we agree, you guys didn't give up these rights. You know, you were probably not treated too good by Canada, but you didn't sell your rights, you didn't sign a treaty. Whatever rights you had before, you still got them. That's the inherent rights of your people. It comes from the Delgamote case, and there's similar American cases. And so right down the line, we got everything we asked for in trial court. In trial court's opinion, it didn't matter to her whether we'd been residing which side of the border. We're still the same people. We had the same culture. There's an unbroken chain of culture and leadership right up to today, and we had to show all that in court. In 1938, we tossed all our chiefs out and we went to elected tribal councils, but it's the same tribes, same people, different laws, some different customs. But it turns out probably half of our elected leaders, they probably would be traditional leaders too, the same bloodlines, you know. Anyway, and so we were happy. The people were happy. The white people were happy too. We went out outside the courtroom and people were honking horns. They were happy. It was on BBC radio and stuff. And then these guys, they'd actually pull up the sidewalk and they'd say, you Americans, you probably don't even listen to radios, do you? And I said, yeah, we do sometimes. He said, well, Nelson, BC, radio is a big thing. He said, and you guys are all over the radio. He said, so we know all about you guys. He said, we're happy you guys won and we're welcoming you back to Nelson, BC. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know if this would happen in OMAC or not. But they were really nice to us in Canada. And they were just, you know, I don't know how long that'll last, but we're still meeting with Canadians. And of course, it's being appealed. Our attorney is from Vancouver, and he up front he said this appeal could last 6 years probably, it could be more or less. And so we're in the appeal process right now. And then the main issue is, like, can an American tribe have Canadian rights? That's the main issue. And so far we're winning. So far we got the court on our side. So far we're not extinct anymore. And I just wish my ancestors were alive, you know. And so we had a guy named Charlie Quintasket, and I think he has some relatives at Swinomish mostly, but he's my godfather, and he kind of raised me too, another one of my grandpas. But his speech was, he was on the campaign post stump every day for Arrow Lakes people. He'd go to Canada and say, I'm Charlie Quintasket, and I'm Arrow Lakes, and I'm extinct, he'd say. And so he kind of beat that into my head every day, you know. And, I just wish he was alive, and I keep thinking he's probably happy the day we won, you know. And so we're in the appeal. You know, whether we win or lose the appeal, you know, we're not going to give up, you know. But we're hoping we win. And those are the same elements for land claims case. Right now, there's kind of a legal land title vacuum for all the ex-Arrow Lakes lands, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen with those lands. And over time, you know, like any tribes, there was intermarriage with all the surrounding tribes. So there's intermarriage with the Okanogans, intermarriage with the Shuswap people, intermarriage with the Kanaha people, and they're all asserting that, well, based on that, they should have land claims too, and it hasn't gotten that far yet. But they're, you know, we're not trying to pick out any new fights or anything. But right now, that's where it's at. And so, thank you for letting me tell my story, and hopefully pretty soon we'll have a better story this will be done with, you know.